Our guest for today's podcast is Bala Nagarajan. Bala has had a first-hand leadership experience leading a Big Four multinational audit firm from 150 people to over 3,000 people. Bala has been the managing director and center head for this multidisciplinary subsidiary. Now, in his innings after retirement from this leadership position, Bala helps a lot of startup founders in their journey, leveraging on his massive experience. Let's listen in to Bala and learn from his journey.
We are looking to unbox patterns and unleash some perspectives through conversations with leaders like yourselves.
So, Bala, thank you for joining us here today. I incidentally happened to meet Bala, I think, way back in 2015, if I'm not wrong. So, because of our work at Unbox, I get an opportunity to interact with a lot of leaders. I was really nervous before meeting Bala. He was heading a large organization, one of the Big Four audit firms, as a managing director. So I remember the team and I preparing a lot for that short meeting we had with him. This was before a program we were running, and that meeting was so easy because what we thought a large corporation's managing director will be and how Bala was starkly, it was a very big difference in the way we had assumed things. So I still remember that very simple human-centric conversation Bala had, gave us some very useful insights, and fortunately we've been in touch over the years, and I've had the fortune of working with Bala for some of our current programs that we run at Unbox, and some of the perspectives he brings to the table are extremely valued. So as a leadership coach, today he helps a lot of startups as well, and guiding a lot of senior leaders in how they can think at the next level, and having some really hands-on experience from his own experience. He shares some really good tidbits that helps leaders who are in our program. So once again, thank you so much for doing this with us, Bala.
Thank you, Saveen. Thank you, Shubhanga. Real pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to the next hour and a half.
Bala, I think, of course, Saveen and you know each other for a while, and we are meeting only today. But would love to know a bit more about your background, like where were you born, how did you get into PwC, and just your life story to put some context into our conversation.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm basically from the south of India, Coimbatore, and then my father was in the army, so all over India. With regard to my education, started off as a chartered accountant. For almost 11 years, I was doing finance and finance-related work, both in India and outside of India as well. Yeah, and surprisingly, I studied BSc Physics and then decided to move on to becoming a CA. So almost 11 years into it, I was living in Indonesia, and I was managing...
So how did you go to Indonesia?
In a finance role, I was in India, so there was an opening there and decided to take it up. So as a family, we moved there. And my mandate was to look after the management information system of the entire group of companies. They're pretty large conglomerate there. And what I noticed was the kind of financial information that used to come from every single unit was completely different. The formats were different. What parameters they were reporting on was different. So then I just put it up to the management, saying that it takes an awfully long time to put these things together and make sense of it. So we should have a uniform system which is implemented across the group companies. So obviously...
When was this?
So this was back in 1995. So then the CEO and the chairman said, since you have brought it up, why don't you head this whole thing? And I thought, well, let me see how this goes. And I started understanding what ERP or a financial system would look like. And that gave me an opportunity to get into the different businesses of that group, because it started from manufacturing pellets to textiles. So entire gamut of products were being churned out. So gave me a good understanding of the business, the various supply chain aspects, production aspects, etc. And then I thought I can understand the business very well. And if I'm able to bring some sort of a software which will take a look at the financial information available and, implement that in a uniform way across the group companies, so why not graduate to the next level of trying to understand a ERP? So I decided that I will come to India, get myself certified with SAP and get myself certified as a finance and controlling consultant. Once I did that, then I went back to Indonesia, and my first opening was with Coopers & Lybrand here in Bangalore, then which transformed to PwC with the acquisition of Coopers & Lybrand. Between India and the US, I then spent close to about 20 plus years in the PwC world. 2019, I decided to come back to India for personal reasons. But the kind of work that we were doing is primarily for clients outside of India. So that really got me interested, because every client was a new challenge, and every industry was new to me, and there were a lot of learnings in that. So I think that kind of quenched my thirst for learning more about different industries and not being stuck in a finance role for ages.
From being a leader, managing director, center head for two entities, right? Bala, both India and US was a small entity you were leading.
Yeah, so there was one main entity here in India, and there were other centers across the globe. Of course, they had their regional leaders, but from India, I was leading it. We had, of course, centers here in Bangalore, Mumbai.
So that decision to take a leap of faith while you had, I think, a few more years of your career left at the top of the org chain, if you have to call it so. How did that happen? Because that's a big decision.
Absolutely right. I mean, much to my the disapproval of my wife, I decided to move on. And I said, startup world seems to be so exciting, so let's give it a try. And once I got to know a little more about that new startup which I wanted to be a part of, I broke the news at home, and still there was resistance. But then I said, okay, now is the time that I could give it a try. It's either now or never. I might just, end my career with PwC and then probably go on to something called a retirement, which I didn't want to do. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah. So what were some decision-making points, if you have to call it so? How did you evaluate the pros and cons? Because it's a difficult decision, I'm sure.
And did you? I mean,
Yeah.
it could
just be a gut also.
True. And the factors weighing in was, one, of course, there's not going to be a steady income, that's a given. But the risks associated with joining a startup, I mean, it could do extremely well, or it could go down the tube. I mean, that was a risk that I was willing to take. And looking at the idea which appealed to me, and I was really excited about the potential of that idea, which was the startup.
you talk about it? What was the idea that kind of...
Yeah, so that was applying artificial intelligence to the culture of an organization.
Okay.
So that seemed to be and especially applicable when you have a lot of mergers and acquisitions taking place across the globe. So that seemed to be a very interesting area. And not many companies had attempted to do that. So bringing in certain logic, certain parameters, and doing it in a structured way to see, because statistics show, and a lot of studies by Deloitte and others also show, that 75% of these mergers actually fail because of a mismatch in the culture. While everybody does a technical due diligence and financial due diligence, the cultures are not assessed in a systematic manner. I mean, the managements come together, it's decided that it will happen, and we just jump into it.
So how would you define culture?
Let's take, I'll give you a concrete example. PricewaterhouseCoopers decided to take Bearing Point into its fold.
Yeah.
Now, Bearing Point was a much smaller organization, and it had specialized in ERP, was doing very well in India, but not so well in the US and other places. And their style of functioning was much different. PwC because I had worked in PwC US before that, I had a sense of, what it was. And when PwC came into India, in fact, the very senior partner there said, Bala, do we have to acquire an entity to get you back into our organization? So it was pretty interesting. And you could see the different in management styles. And that percolates down to the individual teams, the people, the culture, the way in which they work, etc. And it takes a lot of effort to actually bring two cultures together.
So how was AI analytics helping? So you were talking about how was the solution being formulated?
Oh, you're talking about the startup in which So here what happens is, because you have people with different backgrounds in one organization, right? Let's say there are certain functions which will have to be eliminated because, one already exists. Take for instance HR, right? You need not have two HRs in both. You need not have two finance departments in both, etc. Now, who do you include into the organization and who do you eliminate, right? It's not just the entire finance function comes in from one organization, because you've got good people on both sides. Assessing that, their ability to adapt. Some people have a lot of resistance to change, right? So all that needs to be, determined in a very systematic manner. I mean, you can go by gut feeling, but that's not really.
So it is just enabling the leaders to make better decisions on the alignment.
Exactly, of people. Yeah.
So Bala, how is it going now? Are you still actively involved with this startup?
No, I had to disengage with them 2 months down the line, because the irony is, while this was the product itself was to see if there was a culture mismatch or a match, I think there was a culture mismatch between the way I operate and the others in the organization.
Even before the product was ready.
That's right, yeah.
So which essentially means at least there was found a fit to the problem, but clearly the product couldn't, is the startup there, or you kind of disengaged?
I disengaged, and that also fizzled out is what I think.
Okay. Got it.
Can we deep dive on finding the right synchronization in a startup leadership team then? Because that's also critical, I think. Finding a co-founder.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because there are some things that I could have done better myself. One, getting to know not just the product, because the idea must have been a brilliant one, but if there was a certain difference in style of operation between the rest of the people and I, or there were other imperatives which would mean that there's a conflict of interest between us, then I don't think this would have been a good marriage of different kinds of people coming together. So I think that is one due diligence one needs to make, to see that the style of operations, the mindset, is there a cohesion in that within the team? I think that is one of the main factors. Of course, there are other aspects in terms of, share in the business and the money component. That aside, this is of the primary importance. If you're able to have a similar line of thinking, it need not be exact, because there has to be a kind of somebody who questions your ideas, and that's how you develop as a team. But certainly you should understand if the mindset of the other person is completely opposite to the way that you think.
And in hindsight, having kind of gone through what has happened, do you think you decided to move out of PwC too early, or are there any kind of lessons that you would otherwise kind of want to talk about for people who are, and there are tons of people, I'm sure, thinking about wanting to start their own business? What is the right time to kind of quit? Like, knowing what you know, how would you have done differently today?
I would not have done anything differently.
Okay.
Right. And because it varies from person to person, but I'm the type of person that once I've taken a decision, I don't regret having taken a decision. I'll just give you an example. From being a pure chartered accountant and finance role, and I was pretty comfortable doing what I was doing, the decision to move out from finance into a consulting role by itself was a complete change in career. Right? And even before that, when I started my career, I was with a public sector oil company. And you know how cushy the job in a public sector oil company can be, especially living in Mumbai when they have given you such fantastic accommodation and life is set. And this was just as I started my career. And that actually felt to me like a retired life. There was no work pressure, 9 to 5, you head back home and you have nothing to do, no calls, no pressure, nothing at all. From that, when I decided that I will leave that and go to the Middle East on taking up an offer, there was a lot of resistance from my own family and from others as well. And they said, you must be foolish to leave a fantastic public sector job and move on to doing something like this. But I never regretted that, because that gave an exposure to a different way of doing business in a different part of the world. And from then on, taking the next decision of actually moving on to something like this, it was, I think, a challenge in itself. But I never regretted leaving the PwC role and moving on to this. Of course, there were pros and cons in each side, because you have a steady kind of work, you know, your money hitting the bank account every single month. There was certainty in your life. But whereas here, a lot of uncertainties, a lot of risks as well. And once you've decided to take it, I think you should just go ahead and take it. As to how well you navigate a new career that you have, or path that you have taken, I think that is left to you. You can either make it a very successful one or make it absolutely miserable for yourself. So I decided I'll try this out. Things could go well. If not this, I'll move on to something else.
Okay. And having known Bala for all these years, I have the opportunity to talk to him every now and then because of our work. And there are certain guidelines and principles that you follow in all your engagements that you've had, right? So any thoughts on how we need to stick to our own leadership philosophies? Are there any that you hold really close to your heart and say, this is why I will engage with someone, and this is why I will also withdraw from this kind of engagement with any entity of sorts, anything?
Yeah. See, first of all, the purpose for which you're engaging, there has to be a good understanding. Trust is very important, because that is something that I've always believed in, be it you in a large organization, heading an organization, and the trust that you impose on your leaders and your people is extremely important, because we are all, when you talk about service business, it's all about people, right? And if that is not there, then I decide not to engage, right? Honesty is another one, because typically what do you find these days? Everybody wants to shortchange somebody else. But when you find that somebody wants to work along with you, making you successful and becoming successful themselves, I think that's a good thing to come together and work together as a team. But if that is at cross purpose, then it doesn't make any sense, because both the entities are going to be unhappy.
And how do you kind of ascertain those at the time of initiation of engagements? So because honesty or trust is
or integrity for that matter.
Yeah, it takes time to know whether, the person whom you are going to engage with is trustworthy or not. So what are the what are the steps that you take?
You're absolutely right. I mean, first conversation, you don't know if a person is honest or dishonest.
Yeah.
And that kind of was borne out in my first engagement when I moved out of PwC, right? So, yes, you cannot. But prior to that, you're having conversations with that individual, trying to gauge that person, trying to understand what the intent is it sincere enough, etc. And that also comes with experience. Having been in this business, having been across the world, you meet different kinds of people. And there is a certain intuition as well that, hey, this is a person who comes across as a sincere person. Or it might just hit you in the first instance that this is not a genuine person that you're talking to, and you shouldn't engage with him. I think that intuition is something that I would always listen to.
This is a question probably to Shubhanga, right? Because as a part of Beta Plus, Shubhanga takes high stakes decisions, I must say.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, on behalf of investors investing in a startup. So how do you evaluate certain, what do you call these as non-tangible? Because this is not in a, what do you say, in a balance sheet of a startup where you have to invest. How do you check if that integrity and transparency and credibility, trustworthiness?
And so the thing is, obviously, speaking to founders is really the first sense, because I actually kind of start with where they come from, how they have kind of come to where they have come, why they are doing what they're doing out of the million other things that they could have done. But having said that, I mean, these are all kind of questions that you ask. I still kind of, out of the 40 odd investments that Chirant and I have made, there are about 8 that have closed. And 2 of them, we didn't even know that it was closed.
But they didn't inform you.
We got to know because the founder actually kind of went and said, they're working somewhere else. So, and even today, in fact, I struggle with it, right? I mean, in the sense, even in the last few investments, there are certain kind of founders where from the market we are hearing, what, are you sure you wanted to invest in these? Because, but those are investments that have already happened. And so what I've come to realize is, I think I'm on the, I'll trust you most likely. But if you break that trust, that is when, things can go bad.
Absolutely.
And so I also struggle with that part, which is that, if a trust is broken, how do you respond, right? So one is, you can say, whatever, I mean, we can break engagement and go, but many a times if it is things like what we do.
High stakes.
It's more than high stakes, right? Like you are actually you have invested, it is an equity investment in a company where the founder where you have lost trust in the founder, but the investment continues to remain.
Yeah.
So at what point should it become confrontational? I don't know. I don't have an answer, in all honesty. So
has this happened with you?
No. I mean, I'm just saying
if it happens.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond yet, should it happen. But that is something that Chirant and I kind of keep thinking about. But thankfully, the good news is 38 out of the 40, we have not had any such experiences. So if we try to devise our selection process based on these 2, then we are not being fair to most of the ecosystem who are genuine, who are trying to solve a problem, who are truly kind of making a difference in the lives of people around, community around, society around. So I think we have kind of reconciled to state that we will come across such characters in our lives. But hopefully
lesser.
Hopefully, wisdom prevails. Is really the part.
I'll give you another perspective as well, because when I advise the startup founders, I also tell them, just as an investor would do a due diligence in your organization, you should also do a due diligence about the investor, whether your styles will match with theirs. I'll give you an example. So when I went to Mumbai to meet a set of investors, we were called for a meeting at 9 in the morning, reached there in time, got settled in, and then we were told that the investor is coming about a couple of hours late. Said, okay, we'll still wait for that. And so here the person walks in almost at 12:30 in the second half of the day. And the kind of conversations that we had made me absolutely uncomfortable. But of course, as a startup, we're desperate for funding, right? And my other co-founder said, we are quite inclined to go for this. I said, I don't think this will work out, because just the kind of interaction that we had in the very first instance gives me a feeling that this will not be a happy relationship. you would have someone who does not respect time or give credence to the the what you bring to the table, etc. So then we decided against that. So
But what were those red flags, Bala? What did you observe? If you have to put it down into
the very first thing of not respecting,
Okay.
being on time. I can understand, there's traffic, etc., etc. But you can't come 4 hours late to a meeting that you've already agreed upon.
But for me, that is still a clear no, right? The problem comes in the gray in between, right?
Yeah.
Where you really like the conversation, you have shook hands,
Yeah.
and then you kind of
you realize that
you realize that okay, you have shook hands with the wrong people or wrong company or whatever it is.
or misfit culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think especially in commercial engagements, that's what I think. It's still better off to, cut your losses and in if it is a commercial deal or a contract, if you can exit, you should exit, even if it is by paying a small penalty, because the longer term impact could be much. Because
I don't know, one of these podcasts that I was listening to, Naval Ravikant speaks about integrity like that. He says it is a must-have for any long-term relationship. It is not an emotional thing.
yeah,
So I think if you look at it like that, automatically it makes sense. So it is not something that can be cultivated later on.
Yeah.
Correct.
In a business engagement of sorts. But
Yeah, your definition of integrity should be the same as my definition of integrity. If there's a mismatch there, I think it's gone. Just as you do risk management in any organization, I think even as an investor, I'm sure you're doing your risk assessment at different stages. And as to at what point of time you cut your losses and say, I'm out of this relationship as an investor, I think that would vary from one investment to another.
yeah,
for sure. Bala, one of the other things that really inspire, and I was hoping you would talk about it in your intro, is Bala has been an avid marathon runner. And I think that's not easy to do, and he puts in conscious effort. So can you tell us, how did you gain the inspiration? How do you continue to do it? And I think last week you ran a marathon, a full marathon as well. So just walk us through that journey.
Yeah. So I truly believe that any person, and especially a leader, needs to be in a really good shape, both physically and mentally. If you are to lead an organization, just imagine you as a boss come into the office really foul, temper. You had a bad experience earlier in the morning, and then after you come to office, you start treating your own people shabbily. And that's not the culture that you want to have in your organization. So as a leader, you have to be in, I'm not saying excellent physical shape, all muscled, etc., but you should be in a fit stage to lead people. So this is pretty interesting that even when I was at PwC, I used to run marathons, and I would actually make it a point to have that put in the in-house magazine as well. Not with an idea to just propagate that here I am, that I do so many things, etc., but just to inspire some of the new entrants, etc. From starting with just 5 people who joined me in the first run, when I actually left, there were close to about 80 people who would run along with me in various events.
And this was a Bangalore marathon, right?
This could be a variety, because I run the Hyderabad marathon, the Mumbai marathon, etc. So, and doing multiple things. In addition to running full marathons, I also do long distance cycling. So that's another passion of mine. So
what is the duration? I don't know if Shubhanga knows what's a full marathon.
I know it's a 42-kilometer one.
40
Yeah,
kilometers.
42.
So what kind of prep goes behind it?
Oh, it's a tremendous amount of prep, because it's just not just running, but it's also strength training. And then you do a lot of practices in uphill, because there are elevations, etc. For example, last week I was at the Satara Ultra Hill Marathon, and this had a total elevation of 450 meters plus.
Like a half a kilometer.
Half a kilometer elevation along the way. So, you have to be, one, physically prepared, but more important that is you have to be mentally prepared. So for a leader to lead an organization, you have to be mentally strong, And the same goes for a marathon running as well. So I see a lot of similarities between running an organization and running a marathon. Right. So you need to be in the right mental state. You have to prepare well. You should know what should be the nutrition that you should have prior to the run and during the run and subsequent to the run as well. So all these preparatory things is also as important in an organization. When you go into a meeting, I always tell people, you've seen a lot of people come into the meeting even without a notepad and a pen, right? They would not have done sufficient preparation before it. People think they can come to a meeting and wing it. That's the worst kind of meeting to have, and that doesn't augur well for anybody. So preparation is the most important thing, be it as a leader, be it as a team member, be it as a project leader, or as a marathon runner. So seeing all these similarities, I think, there's a lot of things that go alongside in both these things. And therefore, you need to be in good physical shape to be a leader in an organization is what I believe.
Also, there was this interesting anecdote. I got to meet Marshall Goldsmith, one of the best executive coaches in the world. And in his program, he asked the audience a very interesting question. He said, how many of the sports professionals who represent the country and state and so on, you think do not have a coach to guide them? The answer is practically zero. Whereas when you look at a leader working in a corporate setup, at least I think in India, it is fairly large now, it's picking up. But most of the times, they don't have a guide or a coach or a sounding board for them to talk to. So I think you spoke about you having a coach to help you plan your fitness, and I think you're regularly in touch for your marathon prep. So Bala, can you throw some light on having a coach in your professional journey, and how do you find that fit? Like, who should be my coach? How do I find them? Where do I find them?
So I believe that any person in an organization should have two kinds of coaches. One within the organization, because they will help you navigate through the organization. For example, I always tell my young managers or directors that you could even pick a coach who is outside of India. Probably somebody else in a different practice, different vertical.
But within the umbrella of the organization.
Within the umbrella of the organization. So that is one kind of, because they will help you navigate. And that should be somebody that you look up to, right? You should want
aspire
to be, or where you can get tremendous value from them. Because it's not always that within the organization, the same person will keep on coaching you, right? So that is one. But then that is not sufficient. You also need to have somebody from outside as well. Because there are so many things that as a leader or a person who is going to become a leader, there are so many aspects that they cannot speak freely about within the organization because there could be a bias, it could be held against them, etc. Therefore, you need somebody from outside who comes in, who is unbiased, who will not judge you, and who will actually help you genuinely in your career. And that is why I believe any person who's aspiring to go up the ladder, and I think that has started to get embraced these days, is to have somebody within the organization plus somebody from outside the organization.
What are some checkpoints for, let's say, an upcoming or a current manager who's looking to grow into a senior leadership position at a board level and so on? How do they find this coach? What are some key checkpoints that I need to have this to find a coach outside the umbrella of the organization?
Yeah. So there are many aspects that, because every individual has a different sets of set of needs or coaching in different aspects of it. One could be just the ability to speak well, or to prepare for meetings, or to even interact with not just their peers, but also with their own team members, with their leaders, etc. So to find a person who has done this before, someone who they think can actually render value to what they are doing, somebody that they can feel comfortable confiding into as well without being judged. I think these are different criteria. So I always say that as an individual in an organization, meet with several coaches outside of it. talk to the people, try to understand where they come from and as to how really they can help you, because the need of every individual varies, and it should be somebody who fits that need. It could be, okay, I want to improve not just my speaking skills but also technology skills. So find somebody who is a guru in the technology space. So I think that is something that you should.
Great.
And talking about the coach outside the org, so obviously when it comes to, I mean, I have worked in very large organizations as well as small organizations, and now solo. But in larger organizations, of course, I mean, you do get to kind of interact with leaders within your org, and consequently, I did have, looking back at Yes Bank stint of mine, I remember getting really inspired by our CFO Rajat Monga, or our chief economist, and so on and so forth. So I could go up and start, talk about, what I want to learn from them. But back then as well, I didn't really know how to kind of find a coach outside the org. How should one go about doing that?
Yeah.
Especially when it is like an early career or mid-career kind of journeys.
Yeah. So typically these days, any large organization has a very structured program. One is in terms of every year they identify development needs of an individual. And some could be, of course, in the specific area. When I say technology, doesn't mean just the technical skill set, but it could also be industry knowledge, etc. That's a given. So you find there's a deficit and you say, okay, I need to go attend such and such seminars and improve that. But then there could be other areas where this person's, coach within the organization, a mentor or a reporting manager says, other than this, I see you have fantastic knowledge, but you do not know how to express it. So therefore, that should be noted as a development area, and that should be highlighted. So once that happens, then it's left to the HR or learning and development organization within that entity to go out and look for an appropriate coach.
But when it comes to me as an individual, right? So many a times I've also found that despite good efforts from the organization, I might not necessarily find what the organization is providing me sufficient. Could you touch upon, I think we did briefly before this conversation we were speaking, you touched upon networking as a concept.
Oh yeah.
Now, can you find a good coach through networking? And what does networking mean? I just wanted to tie those two concepts and help us understand, how we can do that.
Yeah, sure. So not just in India, and I have found this to be true in the US as well, or any other country where I have come to connect with the individuals. There's a lot of hesitation in people to go across and introduce themselves and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I do this, and I would like to know more about what you do, etc. There's a natural hesitation in the minds of people, and more so if they are fresh out of college and they've just joined an organization, or even if you're a middle manager. Not everybody is an extrovert who can feel comfortable going out and meeting with people. So my advice to them is always go out. Don't feel that you cannot reach out to any of the leaders who come to the organization, or even if there's an external speaker coming in, go introduce yourself. Because even the external person who comes in is also looking for validation that are these people really interested in me? I've seen a lot of talks happening where the speaker comes in, none of the crowd even goes and talks to that person. They just go sit in their seats. This person talks, finishes the talk. After that, probably a few questions, and then that person goes away. That creating that interpersonal, that relationship is most important, which many have not either not comfortable with or haven't started to do that in a very active way. I think one should not hesitate. Mm-hmm. If you think there is somebody outside that organization and you have an opportunity, and that could be meeting at someone else's place, or it could be a seminar, it could be a party, go across, introduce yourself and say, because you could, the amount of learning that you can get from just talking to such person who's experienced, I think that is immeasurable.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship changes that a lot. For me, it was also a challenge. I was not so much of an outgoing person in my school and so on. But once I started on my own and we had to go and sell what we do in certain meetings and spaces, I sort of understood that there is no other way out.
Exactly.
And then it became sort of second nature to do that. And that's why entrepreneurship is such a great teacher, I feel.
Yeah.
But as mid-career professionals, I don't know if they feel the need to do that. Although we see a lot of value in doing that, I think it sort of feels like out of place or outside the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And also depends on the kind of roles you do on a day-to-day basis.
But irrespective of that, I always feel that when you are within your four walls and you're comfortable, your life goes on at a comfortable pace, nothing is disturbing it,
Yeah.
you kind of settle into that kind of a living. But if you are, as you have aspirations, you want to achieve something, you want to do more than what you're doing today, then I think you should reach out and go out, step out, etc. So this is another piece of advice that I tell people. It's not enough if you're just familiar with your own leaders within that same geographical space. Go outside. If it's a large organization, all the more opportunity to network with people.
And find people.
And that is another way of finding a good mentor outside of your own organization from somewhere outside it as well.
Do you have a coach now?
So,
Do you have a coach yourself?
so I don't have one coach actually just coaching
That's
me,
even better. Okay.
right? So I have one coach, definitely a coach for my strength training. I have one coach for my, the running as well. And then when I interact with other people who are much more senior to me and have deeper understanding of the industry, I have long conversations with them, and that continues on a regular basis. I believe them to be my coach as well in the work kind of.
And when did you realize you needed a coach? Which was the first one that you actually kind of brought on?
I mean, I have always believed that every individual, even as a leader, you need a coach.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, for anybody to believe that I have reached that stage where I don't need a coach, I think that is
And
incorrect.
this is often not spoken publicly, at least I've not come across. The question that I keep wondering is, how costly is it to actually kind of have a coach? Especially, when you're just kind of in the early stage, mid stage, you have a family to run, you have 100 other expenses that you need to kind of look at. So the two things that come to my mind is taking coaching expensive, and two is how do you kind of realize value of the coaching that you may be getting? If you can touch upon those.
Sure. So I'll talk about my style of engagement with different kinds of people. So I do pretty high-end coaching where people actually reach out to me, an organization reaches out to me as a subject matter expert in the area of setting up centers in India and all aspects related to it in terms of what are the pitfalls, what should you look out for, what are the different current style of setting up these entities in India. Given my knowledge of what I've done in the past and my current knowledge, because I constantly keep in touch with what is going on in the market and see which way the consulting industry is leading. So in those cases, I charge really high per hour. So
that is not in the personal side, right? That is basically an organizational.
Yeah, I'll come to that.
Yeah, okay.
So that is one area. Second set of people is where I engage with them because it may not be at that particular rate per hour. It is something which is meaningful for both sides. We negotiate, we find out what is. So that's a second style of the way I charge people. Then there are examples where from my running fraternity, somebody reached out to me and somebody referred to them and said, Bala could coach you. And when she approached me, she said, I really cannot afford you. She was upfront. I really cannot afford you, but tell me, what will you charge? So I said, let us talk about money. When you start making money, I'll start making money as well. So we'll come to it that stage. So for almost a year and a half, I was coaching them for free. Then she herself came back and said, now I'm in a position to pay you. I will pay you, but some nominal sum, right? And slowly is graduating. And then she said, when will be the next one? I said, when you next get to the next milestone that we have said, I'm going to charge you much more. So I'm as interested in you succeeding and coming to that stage as fast as you can, right? So that you also compensate me adequately. So even as a coach, I think one needs to be flexible. If your real intent is to help people succeed in what they are doing and do that, because you're absolutely right. I mean, not everybody comes through their organization to get coached.
Yeah.
Some actually take it up, and I've got quite a few cases where they have spent out of their own pocket, and I respect that, because if you're investing in yourself.
I think the question that we need to ask predominantly is, how much am I paying by not seeking coaching or mentoring?
But that's a very hypothetical number, because it's hard to kind of
I'll tell you
know what I'm going to lose.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm missing when
that's the bigger one always. And I think very early in my career, right? So where I was going from not doing what I'm doing to what I aspired to do, like communication, and I was going for this World Championship of Public Speaking competition. And one of my mentors, he said he's practically spent a lot of money just to get himself coached. Now, while I was in a startup mode myself, I didn't have money to pay, like Bala said. But I think it's also about what else can you return back. See, if you really are inspired to learn from someone, you can give them back so much. So my coaches that I found, I would upfront, like Bala said, tell them, hey, I don't have the money and I know what you're giving is worthwhile. But I would always find a way to give them back with the skills that I had. So in fact, my first mentor, I developed the entire website content for him. I wrote it down and helped him. And he's like, oh, this is very helpful. And there was somebody else, he was going for a keynote address. I did the content research, made presentations for him to go deliver in that conference in Germany. And it was very well received. And he's like, oh, this is... So try and give back more than what you take. And I think that's where you value that a lot.
Yeah.
So it is not, I think if you on a day decide that I need help and this is the right person, and like Bala did it, I'm sure there are many people that if you ask, they will not say no, because they also see that you're genuinely curious and you can add value to them. And I think that sort of reward in gratitude that you get back is far higher than the monetary alone, because I think we spoke about this with Abhishant, right? There is also social currency that's involved.
No, I think in essence, money should not be the limiting factor for getting coaching, is what I'm hearing. But more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I see on the other side is, especially we are in Bangalore, and we see a lot of techies who are well paid by organizations. And if you ask them, and this is a question we ask, and if they say they take their career very seriously and they know their areas of weakness, which could be something as simple as standing up and putting a story across about your own product that you've passionately built, they fail miserably, yet they don't want to seek support, which would cost them maybe 2%, 3% of what they make, and yet they hesitate by giving these reasons that, oh, it's too expensive, oh, it is that.
I'll give you a very interesting example, and this is what I had experienced. So somebody had referred someone, and then he reached out to me saying he wants to be coached. He's just changed jobs, and in this new role, a lot was expected of him, and he thought he could not actually step up to that expectation. So he reached out to me, and then we had a set of, I think this was about 6 sessions that we went through. At the end of the 6th session, he said, Bala, I think I will stop. I said, fair. I mean, I don't want you to be dependent on me for life, but that's fine. He said, no, it's only because there is some other pressing personal financial commitment that has come across, so therefore I will not be able to afford you. I said, fair enough. So we closed that. Within a week, and in the course of this sessions of coaching, etc., he had this aim in his mind that he needs to buy a high-end car for himself. And I kept telling him, is that your priority at this point of time? Why don't you focus on getting steady in this new role and set yourself up for success in this new role so that the expectations of your boss is also met. So within a week of stopping this coaching, he got himself a new car. So the person who referred him to me, he said, Bala, I'm so impressed that you coached him so much that he came to a stage where he bought a new car.
Which car was it? I'm just curious.
I think he bought one of those SUVs, which was pretty expensive.
Okay.
And then I started to laugh. I said that was exactly what I told him not to do. And he ended up buying that. So, priorities change. People think you no longer need a coach. It should not be that it's only when you are in a difficult situation that you seek out a coach.
Yeah.
I think that is where a lot of people are.
So, Bala, I think with your hands-on experience leading large teams at an org level, there is a lot of aspiration around growing to the top-notch executive position. So somebody who aspires to grow into that executive leadership position, what are some things that you would advise them to start doing?
See, the industry in which we are, especially consulting, is all about people, right? So one, you should acknowledge the team for what they're doing, having gratitude for the team. And I'll give you one example, which I always insisted that I should bring about is every annual day when we used to have this town hall, when we used to have an event, the first thing that I would do is acknowledge and thank the family of the employees, right? Because they are where they are only because of the support of their, family. It could be parents, it could be the spouse, it could be their own children, etc. So it's very important that you acknowledge that people bring to the table, what they bring to the table, and have that understanding that everybody wants to come into the work wanting to do their best. And it's not every day that they'll also have issues, etc. Work with them, trust them, and make them excel in what they do. That is what will make you a good leader. Now, as a leader, which we talked about earlier as well, there's a constant learning which takes place, right? So even as a person aspiring for the next position, you should see what it takes to get to the next level and prepare yourself in those lines so that somebody does not say, I have not seen you exhibit that particular quality which is required at the next level. So you start performing at the higher level of capability.
In the current role itself.
Yeah, in the current role itself. It's only then people will understand that you have the potential to execute at the higher level.
Yeah, in fact, I remember one of my senior colleagues, Asit Oberoi, he used to lead our transaction banking group. He used to say, people should realize that designation change is the last thing that really happens. They really need to become that leader even before the designation change happens.
Correct.
Because he used to have people from his team probably ask him, when will I become, president, or when will I become senior vice president, or whatever it is. But I think in a moment of candid conversation, he used to tell us that at the end of the day, people should recognize that you first become the president even without the title.
Correct.
Then the title kind of follows.
Correct.
No, thank you so much. And I think for me, it was more like a coaching session itself, because I learned a lot during this podcast. So thank you for giving your time. And hopefully this is going to be the first of many more with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it myself.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Yeah.